Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm your host, Dr. Heather Shah. On behalf of Calwas, I would like to welcome all of you to this webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. Today we have another very interesting topic, and I'm really honored to welcome and introduce our distinguished guest speaker who is going to talk about cultural context in business. We live in an interconnected and globalized world. The COVID 19 pandemic has accelerated interconnectivity through work from home and other digital trends. In this new landscape, operating businesses across the cultures requires more than management practices, organizational process, and financial outcomes. First and foremost, they require an in-depth understanding of the local culture and how things work in that to help us understand how culture impact the business and why it is important to have a basic understanding of cultural frameworks. We have a leading expert joining us from the United States, a globally engaged scholar with both in essence and substance. And I'm sure in this session you are going to learn new amazing things. So stay tuned because an amazing stuff are coming ahead in this session. So before we start, I would like to thank Kalwas for arranging such enlightenment sessions, for their support and providing such a wonderful platform. The aim of Kalwas is to give you the opportunity to connect and interact with world renowned speakers, academic leaders, teachers, authors, researchers, experts, professionals, and businessmen to learn from their experiences, recommendations, suggestions, and tips which will create an impact and will enable you to learn and develop yourself in order to grow and transform individually as well as to contribute to the world in positive way. As our slogan is come, learn, and share knowledge. So today we have an amazing person as a guest. He's a multi-dynamic person with an amazing great qualities, having vast experience and exposure. An internationally known and recognized speaker, we always see him on different platforms while contributing to the field and world. Moreover, through his great knowledge and wisdom, people are getting the right guidance and knowledge. So let me introduce him formally. He is a scholarly associate professor in business, in international business and hospitality management at Washington State University Carson College of Business. He is an expert in luxury, hospitality, and tourism strategy. He teaches several international business classes, including the International Business Management class for Washington State University's top-rated executive MBA program. Last but not the least, he's a wonderful speaker, teacher, author, researcher, professional, and above everything, a great human being. So please help me in welcoming our guest, Professor Rocha. Welcome to Kalwa's platform and thank you for accepting our invitation and welcome to Pakistan virtually. I know we are 13 hours ahead of you, so we appreciate you joining us early in morning your time.
Shukriya, Dr. Haider. Greetings to all of you from the beautiful state of Washington, from the west coast of the United States. I am very honored. I am delighted that I'll be spending some time with all of you today. Uh, the topic for today's presentation is cultural contexts in business. Dr. Haider did a great job by laying out why we need to learn about this. Why is it important? And how is it going to help us? So, to help us kind of advance this conversation, I have put together some slides. So, we will start the slide share so that as I am speaking, you can go along with the visual narrative. My teaching or presenting style is what I call a visual storytelling style. I weave in a lot of personal stories and personal experiences to help make a point, because I truly believe that people do not remember information, they remember stories. So what I'll try to do is, through some stories, explain the construct, the content, and the context of today's presentation. So, Dr.
Wonderful.
Haider, if you could kindly
Yeah.
start the slides.
Yes, Prof. And a gentle reminder to the audience that Prof. Joe will be presenting for about 45 minutes, and he would leave time for question and answer session at the end of presentation. You can ask question by writing in comment section, or you can email us on info@colwas.com. Let us get started. Over to you, Prof. Thank
Very
you.
good. Um, Once again, welcome to all. Today, we are going to be talking about cultural contexts in business. And here is the plan for this session. Like I said, I am going to start off with some of my experiences in cultural contexts. Then we are going to learn about low context cultures versus high context cultures. What are those and why it matters? Then I am going to show you a model called the Iceberg model of culture. And finally, and probably most importantly, we are going to talk about some business etiquettes and what are those. And then we should have enough time in the end for Q&A. Dr. Haider, I just wanted to confirm that you can hear me clearly and see the slides clearly.
Yes, Prof. Perfectly, Prof. Thank you very much. Go
Perfect.
ahead, please.
Perfect. So, as Dr. Haider introduced me, my name is Deep Rocha. I am a scholarly associate professor at Washington State University, Carson College of Business. I hold joint appointments in two areas: international business as well as hospitality business management. I am also the assistant director for the School of Hospitality Business Management. The Washington State University's School of Hospitality is currently ranked the number 2 program in the United States. My primary areas of expertise are luxury hospitality and tourism strategy. I was also elected a member of the board of directors of the state of Washington Tourism. And it is always wonderful to be able to work alongside industry leaders and impact the state of Washington where I live. So I have mentioned the word Washington a couple of times. Some of you may be a little confused because when we say Washington outside of the United States, people normally associate it with Washington, D.C., which is the capital of America. However, I am in the other Washington. I am not in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is here on the East Coast, but I reside on that red highlighted part, which is the state of Washington, which is on the West Coast. To our north is Canada, to our west is the spectacular Pacific Ocean, and to our south is the state of Oregon. Um, we always like to say that Washington has entrepreneurship in our water and in our DNA. Why? Because some of the most well known companies in the world were either founded in Washington or call Washington their home. If you have ever had coffee from Starbucks, Starbucks is a Washington company. Amazon is a Washington company. Microsoft, which is located right in Redmond outside of Seattle, is a Washington company. Boeing, the aircraft manufacturer, is a Washington company. As you can see, between Amazon and Microsoft, we are talking about $1 trillion companies in value. So business and entrepreneurship is very much attuned to Washington. Our largest city is Seattle. It's a spectacularly beautiful city in the Pacific Northwest, a center for technology, for innovation, but also a great place to vacation, a lot of things to do in terms of outdoors and so on and so forth. And here is a picture of where I live, the beautiful college town of Pullman, Washington, which is in eastern Washington in the rolling Palouse Hills. It is an absolutely picture postcard college town, and it is just wonderful to be able to live here. I want to now switch gears and get into my experience with cultural contexts, because before I tell you something about cultural context in business, you might be wondering that if I have some experience in terms of cultural context. And so when I think of my experience with cultural context, I am very fortunate to be able to travel the world and meet and engage with people from all different cultures. Yes, the COVID pandemic did put a dent into some of my travels, but at least again last year in 2021, I was able to start back up with some of my travels and go meet friends, collaborators, colleagues from around the world. So typically, when I am teaching in an American classroom, my classroom looks like this. A lot of group work, a lot of students sitting around discussing, debating, deliberating topics, cases, because I teach within the business environment. But at the same time, I have been using technology-enabled teaching for a long time. I know most people learned about Zoom or Teams in 2020, but I have been doing this since 2017, 2018. My classes were using Zoom to connect with students in United Arab Emirates and Oman and some of the Middle Eastern countries. And I always like to joke that I was on Zoom when Zoom did not even have a virtual background option or any of the security settings. So the reason I'm showing you this, that as much as I enjoy being in a physical classroom like this, I also enjoy pushing the boundaries of technology to deliver education. And we live in wonderful times that today lots of people from around the world can tune into this session and you can watch it. And otherwise, once Dr. Haider posts the link on YouTube later, it is there forever to see. I have actually experimented with other types of technology. For example, this is a telepresence robot. A telepresence robot can be deployed in a classroom where, for example, if I would want to invite Dr. Haider to talk to my students in a physical classroom, not only he can do that, I can give him the control of the telepresence robot. So sitting in Pakistan, he can drive the robot here in a classroom in America and go right up to one of my students and talk with them. So the reason I'm showing you this is technology is literally changing the world, the way we work, we communicate, we live, and we go about our daily lives. My travels have taken me to all over the world. Here I am in the country of Ukraine. I remember this was my first trip there in 2019, talking at a classroom full of people. If you are looking at this classroom, you will see there are rows and rows of desks, very traditional classroom. I have lived in China and I taught in China. There, the students are wonderful. However, the classroom is different from a typical American classroom. As you may be noticing, that there are two giant cameras in the classroom. So it is just a different kind of an environment. I always like to use the word different because each culture that I engage with is different from the other. So Ukraine is different from China, which is different from here I'm speaking at the Breda University in the Netherlands. This university's campus was repurposed from an old Christian monastery. So their main lecture hall is the chapel. You can even see the organ in the background. So once again, once you are on a stage like that, far from the audience, it changes the context and how you actually communicate. Here I am in Phuket, Thailand, doing some workshops with the National Institute of Development Administration. Look at how joyful they are. People in Thailand are extremely warm and friendly and caring. And so when you are engaging in that culture, we are going to learn about low context and high context in a few minutes. This is a very high context culture, and it is always a joy to be there. Compared to that, here I am in the Corvinus Business School in Budapest in Hungary. Wonderful people. However, the culture is more stoic. That means if you see the difference between the people in Phuket and the people in Hungary, that they are just more stoic, means more serious. It takes a little bit more time for them to warm up to you. That means if you understand that, you can nuance your communication strategy, whether you are delivering a presentation or doing a sales speech accordingly, because you need to know where you are going into. And here I am doing a keynote at a university in India a couple of years ago. Last year, one of the trips I was able to do is I was able to spend some time in Denmark. And here I am speaking at the Copenhagen Business Academy. If you notice the classroom, the Nordic countries, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, they are extremely collaborative. They are also extremely low culture and low power distance. if you see, this classroom is not set up like the classroom in many other countries. This is all about open spaces, large windows, natural sunlight, lot of collaboration. Students are sitting around table discussing ideas. And I will tell you another story from this session. I was actually doing a presentation on the experience paradigm, which is the experience economic theory. And then at the end of my presentation, I asked all of these students if they could go around and tell me what they learned from my presentation. So they took the microphone, they shared, and then one of the girls in the back, she raised her hand and said, "Professor, can I ask something?" I said, "Sure." And she said, "Well, we see there are 10 or 11 of our professors from Copenhagen Business School who are also attending your session. Can I ask them what they learned from your session?" Think about it for a moment. And because it is a very low power distance country, a student can actually ask a professor to also share what they learned from this visiting professor session. And each of those professors in Copenhagen Business Academy stood up and shared what they learned from my session. Once again, I'm sharing this example to give you an idea that how cultures and societies work in different contexts. So, in the case of the Nordic countries, like here I'm in Copenhagen, Denmark, is that people are not going to be reverential. They are going to be expecting the same level of respect that they are according to you. You may be a CEO, you may be a senior vice president of a big company, Starbucks or Boeing, doesn't mean that people are going to carry your briefcase and hold open the doors for you in many of these cultures, because it is a much more equitable and equal culture. So the respect flows both ways. So it is very important to understand that. And that's the reason I always like to share my personal experiences with cultural context. And every time I am doing this, I become a better person because I'm learning something new. And I always kind of come back to my hotel room and write notes to myself that, okay, what did I learn today from doing this presentation, say in Copenhagen or in Kiev, Ukraine, or in Budapest? And how can I be a better communicator, a better instructor in the classroom, and so on and so forth? As you may have figured out, that I do a lot of traveling, and of course I love to travel. This is one of my favorite travel memories. On my birthday in 2019, I hiked Machu Picchu, which is one of the most spectacular sites in the world. It is in the country of Peru, high up in the mountains, and my travel takes me to all kinds of places. I'm also very interested in experiencing things that an average person, an average tourist doesn't want to do. For example, I went and visited Chernobyl in Ukraine. If some of you are familiar what happened there, in 1986, this was the site of the world's worst nuclear disaster. Nuclear reactor 4 exploded, and a city of 55,000 people had to be evacuated in less than 2 hours. And today, Chernobyl is still an exclusion zone, highly guarded by the Ukrainian military. You have to go there. But once again, this is a learning experience in a sense that if you are not paying attention, are we asking enough questions of our governments? For example, we have nuclear power plants here in the United States. Like, are they being taken care of? Are we making sure that a Chernobyl doesn't happen in any other country in the world? So for me, travel is not only about joy and pleasure, but it's also about digging deep, engaging with cultures, learning something new, informing myself, and trying to be more nuanced and develop a more nuanced perspective of the world. And all of these travels make me do fun things. For example, when I lived in China, the first time I tried eating fried scorpions, I was scared because this is scorpions. This is not something that an average person in the United States, or for that matter, I'm thinking even in Pakistan, would eat. But I'm in a different country and a different culture, and when I was introduced to it, and I asked them that how would it taste, and somebody said it tastes like shrimp or prawn. I'm like, well, I love prawn, I love shrimp, so I tried it, and it's fantastic. So once again, The reason I'm showing you this is that when you are engaging with different cultures, how do you know if you do not try? Let me repeat. How do you know if you do not try? If I continuously held a fear of eating fried scorpions because it is different, it is unique, it is foreign, it is alien, I would have never known what a fried scorpion tastes like. So, engagement is very important. And to be able to engage, you need to have an open mind. You need to have an open and curious mind, both at the same time. But since we are talking about food here and fried scorpions, let me now bring in a very famous quote by one of my most favorite management philosophers, Peter Drucker. Drucker says, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." Think about it for a minute. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. What does that even mean? It means that if you do not understand the cultural context in wherever you are going, we talked about Starbucks, and we talked about other companies which are Washington based. If they're going to go into a market where they do not understand what the local tastes or likes and dislikes are, doesn't matter what great strategy they have on PowerPoints or reams and reams of strategy papers or white papers, it is just not going to work. So what Drucker is saying is that if you do not have an understanding of the culture, irrespective of how good of a strategy you have for your business, it is just not going to work. What does that mean? Look at McDonald's localization of their menu. There is no bun kebab uh, served in any McDonald's here in America or in UK or in Germany. But when you look at a McDonald's in many parts of Southeast Asia, they have actually gone in, taken a deep dive into the local culture and say, what can we do to actually localize? And we are still McDonald's, the branding and everything remains the same, but what is the cultural context? So in certain cultures, for example, there are many cultures in the world where people do not eat beef or people do not eat pork. McDonald's is not going to serve beef products or pork products in those markets, though if you come to America, what is the McDonald's burger? It's primarily beef. So I'm just saying that the localization is extremely important, and that's how understanding of culture comes into play. So I hope even with this example, you are now trying to understand that understanding of culture is much more than just going to another country and just eating some local food. It has a lot of impact on whether your brand is going to be successful in a certain market or not. And if you do not understand this, then your brand is not going to work at all. You will have to actually close shop and exit that market. I remember this picture very well because this is from right outside of the Great Wall in China. So after hiking the Great Wall outside of Beijing, the capital of China, I was very, very hungry. And I came down from the Great Wall, and lo behold, next to the Great Wall in the Mutanao section, there is a Burger King. Think about it, an American fast food chain next to the Great Wall of China. So I, of course, went into the Burger King and I ordered a burger and all of that kind of stuff. But you look at this picture carefully, the wrapping is actually in Mandarin Chinese. So what I'm saying that this is very well-known American brand, Burger King, which is right outside of the Great Wall in China. However, they have localized and made sure that that the local population is actually comfortable. That is the reason the packaging and even the taste is much more different. I don't know if you know this. The taste of Coca-Cola in Pakistan is different from the Coca-Cola that we get here in the United States, because people in Southeast Asia generally, drink their drinks a little bit more sweeter. So, it is simply the recipe is actually changed a little bit depending on what country they're working in. Starbucks, same thing. In America, Starbucks sells some food, but mainly breakfast items, pastries, and stuff like that. In many parts in Southeast Asia, where people actually eat food with coffee, Starbucks will actually serve things like kebabs and all of those kinds of things, which is absolutely unthinkable here in the North American context. So Starbucks, which is a Washington company, every time they are going into a new market, they're researching and asking, okay, what kind of coffee people like and what do they do? What are the other things that they eat along with coffee and so on and so forth? Let's actually make sure that our product offering is actually matching up to this stuff. So localization is extremely, extremely important. That brings me to low context and high context cultures. Um, you can actually Google low context and high context culture. You will find lots and lots of literature about it. I will just give you a very high level or a broad overview what it is. What is low context culture? A great example of low context culture will be the United States. So, low context culture is primarily individualistic. Society is built around I, me, the individual. That means it is my food, it is my space, and so on and so forth. Low context cultures are also highly task oriented. That means, time is important, completion of tasks is important, professionalism is extremely valued, and communication in low context culture is direct. That means people will mean what they say, and it is much more direct, much more blunt, and much more forthright. Compared to that, high context cultures, Pakistan would be a great example of that, is the main difference is collectivism. Their society is built around we. So if in America the unit is I or the individual, say in a place like Pakistan, the unit is my family, because I am just not an individual. I am a collection of who am I. I am a son, I am a brother, I am a friend, and all of those kinds of things. And in high context cultures, these are far more relationship oriented. So high context culture societies are not transaction driven. So that's the reason if you are going to operate in a high context culture, you have to understand that first what you need to do is you need to actually establish a relationship before you can do business. And how this plays out in the real world. So, for example, in America, if you're going to go into a business meeting, you will start the business meeting, you will exchange only the first 1 minute of pleasantries, or what we call small talk. How are you? How is it going? Oh, it is snowing outside. This is what is called small talk. And then then either the guest or the host will say, shall we get down to business? And you get down to business. You have, say, if the meeting is for 1 hour, your goal is to accomplish the task within that 1 hour and get out of it. Compared to many times, for example, when I do a lot of work in the Middle East, when I am traveling to the Middle East, probably the first 30-35 minutes is just spent in chit chat. We are drinking Arabic coffee, we are exchanging pleasantries, and so on and so forth. And then when you feel ready, then you ask your host, is it okay if we talk about some of the points that we want to discuss? If you do that, if you are operating like a low context culture, like if you are operating like you are going to operate in business in the United States, in the Middle East, or in high context culture, people will think you are very rude, you are very offensive. You don't even have the courtesy to exchange pleasantries. And also in high context cultures, communication is much more nuanced. That means you need to read between the lines. You need to understand body language. Yeah, it is not only what is being said, but how is it being said? Because once again, in relationship oriented societies, people do not like to offend each other. Is something is very, very important. And then it actually plays out in very many different ways. For example, concept of time. In high context cultures, time is open and flexible. In low context culture, time is highly organized. There is a saying, at least in the United States, 5 minutes early is on time is late. That is the reason if you're going to be actually meetings in Germany, in the United States, in Canada, which are low context cultures, if the meeting starts at 10 o'clock, you can almost guarantee that everybody is there at 9:55. If you are walking in at 10 o'clock, you are already late. That's the reason 5 minutes early is on time is late. Uh, and sometimes I see that playing out because when we have students coming to the American universities from high context cultures, they are probably used to walking into class a little late and not thinking anything about it. That is not an acceptable situation on American universities because when I start my class at 10 minutes past 9 o'clock, I close the door at 10 minutes past 9 o'clock and start my lecture. If somebody is going to walk in after that, they are going to disturb the entire class and there'll be a pin drop silence as the student is walking in because everybody is looking at them and basically asking without saying anything, who has given you the permission to disrupt my learning? Because remember, society is based on I. Yeah, I am paying thousands of dollars in tuition to learn at this university. Who has given you the permission to come in late, open the door, and disturb everybody's learning? There is no understanding of we saying that, well, that's okay. As you know, in Southeast Asia, time is a much more flexible concept. So if somebody, your friend, invites you to dinner, they say that, okay, what time would I come? And they'll probably say, maybe whatever, 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock does not mean 8:55 in a Southeast Asian context. It could mean anything from 8:45 to 9:15, 9:20, and so on and so forth. In the United States, if somebody says dinner at 6 p.m., they are expecting you at 5:55. So that is the concept of time. And so I always tell people that if you, coming late or what is called tardiness is considered extremely rude and it is insulting to be late unless you have a pretty good reason. And even then, you are going to actually call the person and say, I'm very sorry, I'm stuck in traffic or something like that. It is considered highly insulting and extremely rude to be late for a meeting, for a class, for any types of stuff. That is not considered a professional etiquette at all to operate like that. And the term that's used in the United States is what is called tardiness or lateness. So this is how high context cultures and low context cultures basically play out. So depending on what type of culture you are operating, it is important to understand the nuances of where people are coming from so that you unknowingly do not even offend them. But sometimes it does happen, which is not that big of a deal because people are also kind and understanding. They understand that if you are not from their culture or their country, that you won't know some of these things. Communication styles, low context cultures, very overt and explicit, simple and clear. I am going to say what I want to say, and you are going to read it just like that. Focus is on verbal communication. In the North American context, eye contact is expected. If you are talking to somebody and you are not making eye contact, it is considered very rude. That means I really do not want to talk with you if you are not making eye contact. As you know, that is not the case in many cultures around the world. You do not make eye contact, say, with people of opposite gender or people of authority, and so on and so forth in many cultures. Small talk, like I said, is very brief, does not involve personal information. In the United States, we never ask personal information. For example, we never ask people that whether they are married or single, whether they have children, and so on and so forth. Those are considered extremely rude and prying questions. Compared to that, in high context cultures, communication is much more covert and implicit. There's a lot of use of metaphors and reading between the lines. Non-verbal communication is extremely important. Eye contact, avoidance based on rank and hierarchy, and small talk is usually extended, like I said. You would do chit chat, build a relationship before you start a business discussion or a conversation. And it will probably involve personal information. Once again, in high context cultures, people are not prying, but because they themselves see as a unit within family, within society. They are by asking the question, are you married? Do you have children? And all of that. They're just trying to position where you are, who you are. They are not being rude or offensive. But it is important to be mindful of these differences so that when you are operating in different parts of the world, that this can be interpreted or misinterpreted differently. Dr. Haider, are we doing okay?
Yes, Prof, I am enjoying what you are saying and the experiences, the examples, really so captivating. Thank you very much. Please continue.
Thank you. That brings me to this model, which is called culture as an iceberg. Why? Because there are basically three types of culture, and what we call the deep culture, which is below this water, just like an iceberg, is something that we don't see or we are not aware of. So that, for example, if I am going in from the from USA to another culture which I do not know, there are things that we will be completely unaware of. But then there are things which is called high culture or folk culture, which are visible and people can be aware of. High culture are things like fine arts, drama, literature, classical music. Folk culture are things like humor, religion, popular music, etiquette, like what is the basic etiquette? Like in the Middle East, normally I will never shake hands with a person of opposite gender unless they put out their hand and shake hands with me. I train myself. Compared to that, here in North America, if you are not going to shake hands with people, well, not now during COVID, we are now doing this shoulder bump these days, not handshake. But the point is that's how people greet each other. There are many countries, for example, Brazil or Argentina, people will come up to you and excuse me, give you a kiss on the cheek. That's how they essentially greet each other. That might be very uncomfortable from someone who is not familiar with that kind of culture. So it is important to actually keep this model in mind that before we are traveling or engaging with people from different cultures, asking this question: what are the things that I know? What are the things I can find out? And what are some of the things I need to be careful about? There are certain countries in the world where you say, for example, you do not talk about, say, a monarchy or the government or so on and so forth. It can get you into big trouble just by talking about them. I'm not talking about criticizing. I'm talking about just talking about them because it is just not done. So those are the things that you just need to be aware of, and that is very, very, very important. I now want to switch gears and I want to talk essentially about business etiquette. So, how does all of these understandings of low context versus high context, how does the understanding of things like this culture as an iceberg translate into business etiquette? When we talk about business etiquette, there are three things which are extremely important. One is emotional intelligence, then situational intelligence, and cultural awareness. What is emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence is the ability to actually put yourself in other people's shoes and think from their perspective. Situational intelligence is if you are doing business, you are going into a room, you are the ability to read the room, read the people. How are they dressed? How are they talking? And finally, cultural awareness. What are some of the do's and don'ts? Like, what are some of the things that you do not do? Like in the United States, if you're going to do business, you cannot be late. I'm just saying that is going to be considered very rude and offensive compared to in many, many other countries. Like in Japan, if you are going to be doing business, you have to come in and then you remove your outside shoes and then you put on these indoor slippers and then go in for meetings. You do not walk in with your outside shoes into most Japanese business meetings and so on and so forth. It is very, very common for you to for people to actually take off their shoes, put on the indoor slippers, and then they will go into a room where everybody is actually sitting on floor. They may be wearing Gucci and Prada suits, but then they're wearing indoor slippers with their socks and sitting around on the floor and having very serious business decisions. So it is important to understand that kinds of stuff. I talked about situational awareness. Here I am at a very high level meeting in Thailand. As you can see, this is a very, very, very formal meeting. But if you see my host, the lady, how her knees are actually 45 degrees bent towards me, and how her hands are actually placed on her knees. And you will see I am kind of mirroring her body posture, so that I am reading the cue from how she is sitting. And rather than crossing my legs or sitting in a very different posture, by turning to her 45 degrees, I am trying to basically mirror her body posture so that we are both very comfortable during the communication. So once again, gradually you basically pick up all of these kinds of things. So situational awareness is extremely important. I take my students all over the world, and one of the things I do is, when I'm taking students to travel all over the world, I teach them that how to actually behave professionally and even dress professionally. Here we are at the Ministry of Tourism in Oman, where this is Her Excellency Maital Maruki, the Undersecretary of the Ministry of Tourism in Oman. They are very kind. They always do a strategy presentation for my students. But look at how all of my students are dressed. They do not look like college students. I always tell them, I want you to look like young professionals. So I want my students to look like young professionals. Their professional attire should match the occasion and the environment that they're in. So it is very, very important. This is also the way to show respect. And once again, you don't have to wear designer suits. What you need to do is you need to understand the gravity and the professional setting of the situation, and dress appropriately. This is also a very important skill. Whenever I take my students in Dubai, I always spend an afternoon at the Sheikh Mohammed Center for Cultural Understanding. This is a great way to understand cultural context. And these cultural interpreters, they do a fabulous job. Like, why do the men wear white? Why do the women wear black? They answer all of these questions. Look at how lunch is served, because in many parts of the world, food is not about I, food is about we. We always sit around and share the room, share a meal, unlike in America, where people mostly eat by themselves because time is very important. I have 30 minutes for lunch. I want to get lunch, read a book or something like that, listen to music, and go back to my work, and so on and so forth. So for American students to even experience this kind of what I call communal dining experience is a whole like new experience. Like, wow, people just serve food in these very large containers, and you just pick up and eat like that, and for like lunch goes on like for 2 hours. Yes, that's culture. In many parts of the world, that's what they do. Like, in the holy month of Ramadan, when people break fast, this is how people eat. People are just not sitting by themselves and eating. So this is the nuances. Also an understanding of otherness. For example, one of the things I love about the Sheikh Mohammed Center is that at the end of the presentation, they will bring out abayas and ask our students, would you like to try? What does it feel to wear an abaya? Because for a young American college student, they have no frame of reference. Like, they have only seen pictures. And this is how you develop a sense of otherness, that how do we actually create or imbibe senses of a culture that is different from ours. It doesn't mean that I have to like or dislike anything. Like, I'm stressing, it is not about good or bad. It is not about unique or not unique. It is just different, and acknowledgement that it is different. So cultural context in business. What are the things to remember? Research the culture you'll be interacting with. Listen, observe, learn. Very important. Listen, then observe and learn. Listen to what people are saying, observe what they're doing. Ask and clarify what is appropriate. Many times when I'm traveling to a country that I have never been to, or I don't know something, I will ask my host that, is it okay? Is it okay to do this? And because they know that I'm an outsider, they will say, yeah, absolutely. Or they will say, maybe you want to do this. Sometimes I will even ask them that I want to bring a gift for somebody. What would be an appropriate gift? For example, in Eastern Europe, it is important, say, for example, if you're going to give flowers to somebody, there is a rule that how many flowers, in terms of whether it's an odd number or an even number, it is considered. Sometimes the numbers denote that what kind of an occasion it is going to be. So if you pick up a number of flowers that is actually given when somebody has passed away or when somebody died, and you are giving it to somebody, who is there, it can be considered very rude and offensive. So I'm asking those questions. Another thing that I do, I always err on the side of formality. For example, like at the beginning of like before we started the session, Dr. Haider was very kindly commenting on that, how I dress professionally. There's a reason for this, as because I would like to err on the side of formality, because I do not know what kind of a context I am walking into. And I say this to all of my students, that if you are actually dressed professionally and you are looking sharp, people will take notice, and people will also appreciate the fact that you have taken the time to prepare yourself. You see, it goes more than just looking nice. It is about preparation, it is about professionalism, and people appreciate that. At least I'm talking about the North American context. And finally, emotional intelligence is key. Remember that there are certain attributes or characteristics which are culture agnostic. It doesn't matter whether you are in America or Pakistan or Germany or wherever. Things like empathy, things like respect, things like grace, gratitude, the ability to hold the door open for somebody and say after you, and greet somebody, look them in the eye, offer a warm, friendly smile and welcoming smile. These things are universal. People respond to these things across the world. I mean, it doesn't matter which country or culture you are in. And finally, I'd like to end with another heartwarming story. So in November, I went back to Ukraine for some business visits. So I was visiting four of our university partners. And this was a very, very busy trip. I was traveling to four cities within Ukraine, doing a lot of meetings. And here is a picture from one of the meetings with the rector and the senior executive leadership team, the vice rectors at Alfred Nobel University. As you can see, this is a very formal setting. I have a lot of important issues to discuss and negotiate, and I had 2 hours to accomplish that meeting. But then this was also the day when we had Thanksgiving, which is a big celebration in America. Thanksgiving is the day where most Americans come home and spend with their families and so on and so forth. So as we were wrapping up the meeting, Professor Kola, the gentleman who is sitting in the middle, the rector, asked me what I was doing for dinner. And I said, well, back home, it is Thanksgiving. So I am going to find some interesting food to eat here in Ukraine and celebrate Thanksgiving. And he turned to to the vice rector next, and she basically translated about Thanksgiving. And Professor Kolo jumped up and said, "Well, wait a minute. You are going to be my guest for Thanksgiving dinner tonight." So in the morning, during the day, we were doing a professional business meeting. We were discussing many parts, but in the evening, we were friends. Yeah, I was hosted to an amazing meal. And this is what I talk about when I talk about cultural context in business. That the are you developing the understanding and the breadth and the personality to do both, to connect with people, build relationships, but beyond business, can you also nurture friendships where you sit down and you break bread and you have a wonderful dinner, you learn from each other. I mean, he was teaching me about this amazing Ukrainian food, and it was like an education in Ukrainian cuisine for me, in a sense, and different kinds of things. So that for me essentially is the cultural context in business. It is all of this, like what Drucker said, that You can have all of these strategies, all of these thoughts. You can wear the best of suits. You can have all of that kind of stuff. But if you do not understand the culture that you are operating in, your strategy is not going to work. And whether you are trying to sell something or you're trying to negotiate something is not going to work. So that's the end of my presentation. I hope this was useful, and we will open it up for questions now.
Wow, super presentation, Prof. Jha. It was so nice and really awesome presentation. The way you started was so wonderful, and you started just building a story by sharing your own experiences. Prof, we were conducting one session with the Toastmaster specialist, and he was saying in his session that it is always good to build a story because people are going to remember the story rather than just claiming the different things. And that's what the beauty of the expert. You did the same thing. You started and you build up the story by sharing your own different pictures, images, the way you have gained a lot of cultural context understanding. That was so super part. And then you give a lot of examples regarding starting from the McDonald's to the very much evident in your own what you were explaining, because you have seen the low context and the high context culture by yourself, as you have given the different countries examples, the classrooms, particularly the Thailand and the Denmark and the rest, was so nice. And I learned a lot from this session personally, Prof. Thank you very much. And the way you mentioned the business etiquettes, yes, Prof, nowadays a lot of universities, they are introducing the courses, the 8 weeks course, the 6 weeks course for the personality grooming and business etiquettes. Why? Because it is very essential. And I love your quotations, different quotes you have given, like for example, the 5 minutes early to the meeting, not if you are on time, you are late. It's so nice. It's a wonderful message to the world, that how do you actually honor the time. And I love the slide of the concept of the time, that what is that. So everything was so super. Prof, your slides were so awesome, the content was so awesome. It was simple, but again it was heavily loaded, because the way you were explaining the things and you were connecting different dots were so nice. Yes, Prof. Should we start with the first question?
Please go ahead.
Yeah. For example, conducting cultural ceremonies Prof, can you hear me?
No, your audio completely cut out. I think we are having internet trouble. Could you repeat the question one more time?
Internet issue maybe again. Now, can you hear me, Prof?
Yes, now I can.
Okay, Prof. Prof, the question is they want to ask that, Prof, since you are from the leading organization, share your thoughts on cultural fit. To ensure culture fit, do we have specific hiring practices? For example, conducting cultural fit interview? Yes, please.
That's a great question. Yes, almost all organizations now actually do culture fits because organizations, especially global organizations, I was just talking to one of my students from the executive MBA class who is currently working for Meta, which is the new name of Facebook. So she was telling me that most of her questions were actually not about the hard skills, but it were about the soft skills and the culture fit. Because if you are a global organization such as Meta, Starbucks, Amazon, whatever, it is far more important that what kind of cultural characteristics are you are going to bring in. So yes, of course, one of the things I always tell my students is employers will hire you not only for what you know, but more importantly, for what you can do. That means the doing aspect has got a lot to do with whether you fit in their organizational culture. I work with some of the best luxury brands in the world, especially in hospitality. And I can tell you that brands such as Four Seasons Hotels, Ritz Carlton, which are one of the most well known storied luxury brands, for them, when they are looking at hiring people, it is all about the culture fit. And that culture fit is just not an esoteric abstract exercise. For example, Ritz Carlton's organizational motto is "We are ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen." Let me repeat: we are ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. So they are not looking for staff, they are not looking for employees, they are not looking for team members. They are looking for ladies and gentlemen who are going to serve ladies and gentlemen. So are you, fitting into that mode or that culture fit through your attitude, through your body language, through how you speak, how you come across, and all of that kind of stuff. So culture fit is the most important criteria now, especially for large organizations, because I mean, you can hire very smart people, but if they are not the culture fit, your organization is not going to thrive or survive.
Yes, Prof. I think we have again this internet issue. Prof, another question quickly I would ask, because that gentleman has posted it in the comment section, that which factors do you think is most important in shaping an organization's culture? Now they are talking about the internal culture.
I would say the quality of leadership is the most important characteristics. What qualities the leader demonstrates, because the leader sets the agenda for any organization. Uh, so the values and qualities of leadership is, I would say, the most important characteristic that shapes an organizational culture, because it has to come from the top. If the leader is not role modeling the culture, then it is just it is hypocritical. It doesn't make sense at all to say that we have a great culture when the people at the top are actually not modeling it.
Yes, Prof. Sorry for interruption. I think there is internet problem. Prof, quickly, I would ask for your message to the world as a teacher, researcher, professional, educator, and learner. Yes, please.
Oh, that's a very heavy question. But thank you for asking. I always tell people have an open mind, be curious, and enjoy and have fun. That's my very simple message.
Very nicely said, Prof. Thank you very much. And indeed, I would say that cultural context is very important for our business, particularly. Do follow the distinguished guest speaker through his research work, and you can email him for future learning and guidance. He is very generous and always ready to help the people. So that is all we have time for today. Thank you once again, Professor Deproja. And I would like to thank our audience who joined us. If you have any additional question about information shared today, please email to us or connect with the Professor George directly through his email, LinkedIn, or social media. Thank you all for your support and liking our session. Stay tuned as many sessions are on the way. Please do not miss any session. And the next session, take care of yourself. Bye bye.